Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and it is Saturday, the 10th of August. We are already like a third of the way through August and today is definitely a much better day. As you can see, things look a lot brighter in my room. It's not like there's this gray, there's an actual sunrise. It's still a little bit humid, but it's definitely calmed down a lot. I think we had... Sorry, let me just move this here. I feel like I'm gonna move my camera a little bit here and back up. Okay. Yeah, it was yesterday was interesting because now, again, I'm sure people who live in Pennsylvania and so forth have a different experience, but here where I live in New Jersey, it was not this tropical depression. It was kind of far off to the west. And we had the wind all day, but it was not a real hurricane force wind. Excuse me, I'm sniffly this morning too. It wasn't a real hurricane force wind, so I would get it. So I had windows open all day because it was so still with the humidity that comes with a tropical storm. If you're not familiar with those, like if you don't live in an area that has them. And so while I was sitting working, I had the windows open. My internet kept crapping out. Even though everything was saying everything was live and that there was, full bars and all that kind of stuff on my phone and everything, it was extremely annoying because it just would all of a sudden, I would try to load something and a page would take forever to load. So I finally would just have to unplug the router. And if anybody has Xfinity for their internet, their routers are garbage. They just are. They make noise. Like every now and again, it'll suddenly hear this noise, like a mini aircraft carrier in my end. It's like it's the modem, and it's usually at a time when I'm not even on the internet. So it's just very, very odd. But anyway, and then the plug doesn't want to stay in. It's like you have to balance it just the right way to keep the plug in because it's in the back of the actual unit. So it's just a really cheesy outfit. So I had. I had to unplug it, wait, plug it back in, and then the internet came back. I've had to do that a few times now. They've claimed that they've upped my internet speed, so I'm going to have to contact them and see whether or not this modem is supposedly this is the high-speed modem, but it's not, it doesn't appear to be keeping up with whatever it is that they're doing. So, anyway, that's what is it? I don't know if you call that a first world problem. I don't know. Anyway, it's something that I have to deal with, but... So it's been, so today anyway has been like a tremendous relief in terms of waking up, not seeing just this flat gray, hot, humid. Tomorrow morning is going to be even better. So, because then really, I think the humidity is still kind of pulling away, but it's definitely clear skies at this point and, pretty much as they said it was going to be. And it's going to be a really nice weekend. I think they're having a parade in town today. That's what I saw. I think they're doing the fire company parade or something like that. I mean, this is the area I live in, right? It's just that's the that's the highlight of the year. And actually, when you go to their website, I think the fire company is the big thing that they feature. I have actually had men in this town that I've come to work on stuff at my house being like, well, I'm in the fire department, and I'm like, okay, I mean, listen. Fire services people are hugely, hugely important. I'm not even I'm not, dissing them or looking down on people who do. I mean, they do something very, very important and very, very dangerous. So, kudos to them. But it's not going to be something that's going to sexually attract me to you. I mean, just kind of the way it was said. I was just like, okay, so, good on you. That's great. And I mean, from what I understand, it's kind of like a social club where they, I don't know. Just judging from this town, I'm like, it's not a social club I really want to join. So, anyway. So this morning, so far nobody's on so far, but maybe people might be joining in, and if they don't, then I'll just be talking to myself, and then I'll upload it, and people can watch it later. Today, when I woke up, it was kind of I had a very interesting night. I was having dreams about the T-square that's coming up. There's one that's coming up on the 14th to the 19th of of August. Now, my understanding, I haven't looked heavily into what this T-square does, so I can't talk a whole lot about it. I've got to read up on it now that I've had a dream about it, but I kept seeing it in my head. Like, I kept seeing that T coming up in my head, and I knew that's what it was about. Because I know there's things happening in that time period, and of course we have the next full moon on August 17th, which is the full moon in Aquarius. And I don't know, there's something significant about that time frame. Now, supposedly it's a very auspicious T-square. It's not, sometimes when we talk about squares and things like that, or certain types of crosses, they can actually represent difficulty or resistance. But that one is supposed to be a good one, especially for the mutable signs. And the mutable signs are the ones, cardinal signs are generally signs come in threes, okay? So you have like Aries, Taurus, Gemini, okay? And so you have fire, earth, actually they come in fours. Fire, earth, air, and then water is how it goes. So Aries is fire, Taurus is earth, Gemini is air, Cancer is water. Then we start over again. Leo is fire, Virgo is earth, Libra is air, Scorpio is water. Then we start over again. Sagittarius is fire, Capricorn is earth, Aquarius is air, Pisces is water. Okay, so you see what the cycle is. But they also go in groups of three that seem to correspond to the seasons. So Aries season, Aries through Gemini. Aries would be the cardinal sign. It's the first one in the season. Taurus would be the fixed sign because it is it's the one in the middle. It's the stable one. And Gemini would be the mutable sign because Gemini is the last one. It's the one that's at the point before the change is going to come into the next season. And so then we start again. Cancer is a cardinal sign. Leo is a fixed sign. And Virgo would be a mutable sign. And then so on and so forth. So the people who are in the mutable signs, which would be in that case, okay, let's see if I can get these right. It would be Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and then Pisces, I think, yes. So, good morning. Yeah, I'm just talking this morning a little bit about this T-square that's coming up. I don't quite know what it means, but I've had dreams about it last night, so yeah. So anyway, I might look into that more and talk a little bit more about it tomorrow. But the topic actually that came up for me today in terms of this live stream has to do with confidence. Okay, with confidence and things having to do around self-care. Now, when I say self-care, I mean, people think all kinds of things with self-care. They think like, going out for a spa day or something like that, or going out and having retail therapy. But this is not really what it's about, at least not in the way that I'm talking about it. What it has more to do with is the way in which we often, we're in Chiron retrograde season, so there's been a lot around people's wounds. A lot of the people that I'm working with are people with wounds. We're dealing with the stuff that people have that we come into this life with that seems to just kind of get us over and over again. It could be that we feel that nobody appreciates the work that we do. It could be that we feel like we didn't have stability and we were neglected financially, so we may have a lot of wounds around money or stability. Like people have the Cancer Chiron would be people who have, family wounds, that their family didn't take care of them. And so on and so forth. I think I've mentioned my sister's Chiron in Pisces, so she is somebody who is skeptical of any and all religion because, that's the wound around spirituality. So so there's different kinds of wounding that people have. But the thing is, whatever face that we present to people, okay, however we are, the bottom line is there's always a wound there. Now, whether it's just strictly the Chiron wound or other things, but generally, when there's a criticism going on, that criticism is more a criticism that we put on ourselves. Okay, they say that you're your own worst enemy. I mean, now of course you have this kind of inner voice. You have this inner, I don't know. I never like the term higher self, but people will use that term and people know what that term means. It's really, I just think of it as more as like whatever that spark is inside of you, whatever it is inside you that makes you unique, that represents the fire that you have, that represents the gift that you have, whatever that is, okay, and however you want to construe that. But we also have a really vicious kind of inner critic. Now again, Jung tends to associate this with the soul archetype. He'll say that, like for women especially, he will say it is the animus type that is judgy. Okay, and that's that aspect that we see when you get women in groups and they're all like, they're nice to your face and then they're all sit around, talking about each other. That's like a negative aspect of animus. Okay, because it's almost like a group that comes in and judges you, whether you look a certain way, whether you have a certain, you meet some kind of social moral code or something like that, or your actions or something about you, or whether people approve or disapprove of your lifestyle or what you do. There's a lot of energy around that, and there's also energy. So, and again, this is stuff that is external to us. And I mean, again, men, I don't know if men do this quite in the same way. I know that, and I'm just thinking about work environments, okay? I'm not thinking, and this is only anecdotal because it's from my experience. Everybody will have different experiences, and it depends on the place you work and obviously the personalities and issues of the people that you're around. It's going to vary widely. But my experience of working with men has actually always been better than my experience of working with women, because a lot of times, I mean, I've worked with a lot of women who I've got on with really well. I don't want to make it like it's always been like that. Especially other earth sign women. We just kind of, we're all like, yep, okay, this is what we got to go do. We got to get planned. We got to do this. We got to do that. And then when we have the one person off to the side, like I remember when my last job that I worked that was full-time, our boss was an Aquarius, and we used to refer to her management as Aquarian management. But again, she was the best person. She was the nicest person. She was very friendly. Nothing against her at all. Very competent person. But we would start on certain initiatives, and she'd go, oh, never mind, I don't think that's going to work. Let's go shift gears and do something else. And it drove us nuts and it was driving my staff nuts, because it was like, we've just put all this work into something, and now it's just like, oh, never mind, maybe another year. It was just like, there was this kind of just sudden, let's just change direction like randomly. And that drove people absolutely insane. And that can be very, very demoralizing too, because you're kind of in this space where you're like, okay. Or you're told to work very hard on something, and then everything you want to work on, like there's no funding for it. There's so much there that goes on externally and in our interactions with other people. But as I've said before, in our interactions with other people, it's a little bit like looking into a mirror. So whenever we walk around with people, I've always said it's like you're in a hall of mirrors, because you cannot see yourself without a mirror, or in this case, like I'm looking at myself in a camera. It's unless you have something to reflect your image back, you don't see what you look like. Okay. You have, just if I had no reflective surfaces or anything, I mean, yeah, I could look down at, my hands, I could look down like at my feet, other parts of my body, but like, I'm not going to know what my face looks like. Okay. I'm not going to, unless I knew it by like touch or something like that. So a lot of times what we know, and of course, yeah, I imagine people who don't have sight learn a whole different way of seeing and recognizing people. So there is that, but that actually leads to the interesting question about using facilities other than sight to to understand the world. But yeah, so what ends up happening is that we end up seeing ourselves a lot in other people. And when I teach classes, especially when I teach myth and when I teach things like that, and we talk about mythological narratives, I always say to people, okay, when we talk about a particular story, when I teach myth, I teach it thematically. So I will look at creation myths, then I will look at, flood myths, which tend to be, they're very similar in, usually in proximity to each other. There tends to be a proximity there between the two. I will talk about myths of the underworld. I will talk about myths, like I talk about collective mythology versus individual mythology. Individual mythology has more to do with the hero and the hero's journey, okay, and the divine children and things like that. That's more about the progress of the individual in their psychological development. So this collective mythology is there. When we talk about these stories, what I always will say to my students, is not so much in the academic classroom, but when I'm teaching this outside of that context, I always say to people, okay, well, what attracts you and what repels you? Like when you read mythical stories. Now, sometimes people are triggered in a story by a direct event. Like I have a lot of students, if they have experienced any kind of, say, we'll just call it sexual trauma, then if they are watching, if they are the story of Persephone, they might be just kind of like, oh, they may freak out at that story. I've heard actually stories where they've said, oh, people should not be teaching the Persephone myth because of what happens in it. And I'm like, well, what happens in it is not, that's not really what it is. I mean, it's really, I've said before, the Persephone myth is actually one about, really, it's about, I just see it as a myth of like girls going into, really young womanhood, okay, menarche, that point at which you go into menstruation and things like that. Like that's what I see the Persephone myth as, because it's like you're torn away from your childhood, and now you're in this darker space where now there's like there's like the secrecy of the underworld, and then there's the sexuality, and then there's this whole new way of being that is around that mystery of your creative ability in that respect. So there's a whole lot there, which is why I say, no, that's really why you want to teach that myth. But it's always interesting to me when I get feedback from students about how they feel. Because if there's certain myths that are just like, I don't like that, I can't, whatever you can't look at tells you something about yourself. And whatever you're really drawn to, or there's the paradoxical one where you're really drawn to it and really repelled by it at the same time. It's like the car accident, train wreck kind of thing where you can't look away. All of these things tell you about something that's going on in the inner dynamic. Now, a lot of people misinterpret this because they will see somebody behave in a certain way, and if that makes them angry, or if a person attacks them in a certain way, or says something critical. If we think about how it is that when we're criticized about stuff, that we don't, our first instinct when we're criticized is to, if we have something and we have 20 great comments, everybody telling us what a great thing we're doing, what a great job we're doing, and one person says, oh, I hated it, it sucked. Okay, if you do that, if you have that, your focus is going to be laser-like on that one person who says that you suck, right? I mean, and that's going to be the thing that gets to you. But the reason it gets to you is because there's a part of you that's telling you that you suck. Okay? That's the thing. It's not that you are a bad person and that you do suck. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that's very subjective. But the bottom line is, these things get to you because they're things that you feel within yourself. And so the question then becomes, okay, what's the script or what's the narrative that makes me think that, where do I get the idea that I'm a terrible person and that, I'm, that everything I do is wrong and is a failure. And we've talked a bit in this live stream about the card that comes up a lot. I think I saw it again in here. Let me just see. There's actually a couple of them. I saw the other one today in this particular deck, and I like this particular deck because it's very clear about. I think the imagery in it is much clearer in terms of what we're talking about here. We had this card yesterday. Here it is. Yeah, it's this one. It's the Outsider card. Okay, and as you see, there's a child on this card. All right, and the child feels locked out. There's a lot of our anxiety. Again, it's something that's both internal and external, because it has to do with our desire to fit in with our group and our environment. Okay, we all want to belong. I don't think there's anybody who's just like, yeah, I want to get up every day and just have, everybody hate me and oppose everything that I'm doing. I mean, nobody wants that, right? Nobody feels that way. So, but a lot of times we tend to internalize that because socially you're not allowed to, the idea, they talk about being the bigger person. So if somebody attacks you, you're not supposed to turn around and say, F you, mother effer. You're not supposed to do that. It's just kind of like, no, you're supposed to be the more mature person here or whatever. Or you're not supposed to let it get to you. But the thing is, a lot of times externally we say, oh, well, that person, but internally it gets to you. So what ends up happening is that you kind of have this, because you push it back, it becomes this reservoir of self-hatred that either going to manifest at some point as anger over something that's going to seem like it's not that big of a deal. Why am I angry about this? It's not that big of a deal. Or it's going to manifest as something that, as like a depression, as a sense of like what you're doing is not good enough, or you're not good enough. And so the theme that had come up today was the star. I mean, it was the idea, and not the star, actually the tarot star, but the idea of being the star. I think in the cartouche deck, it was more like a crook and flail energy. It's like, no, we've talked this week a lot about lions with the Lion's Gate, which is going to end on the 12th, is the last day of the Lion's Gate portal. And when we talk about lions, it's like, okay, this is you. And even my guru had said it last Monday, people need to be lions. They need to speak up with the talents and abilities that they have. And because karma is one of those things, if you're a believer in the karma system, is the idea that your actions, it's not only your actions that have consequences, but also your non-actions. So in other words, if you're not using the gifts that you have, that can be just as bad as using, as misusing the gifts that you have. Okay, so yeah, so when I think about that, because a lot of times there's people who are very, very good at something, but then because they've gotten a criticism somewhere along the line, they said, oh, well, never mind, I'm not good at this, I can't do it. And then it's like, what is the expression? Hiding your light under a bushel. You're not showing people the thing that you have, the manifestation, the full manifestation of you. So I think what we're saying here is that there's a need to find, it's like, okay, there's a need, when we talk about self-care then, if we go back to that expression, self-care means saying, it's not just about caring for the physical body, okay, which can be part of it, I guess, but it's really more about being kind to yourself. Like when we talk about forgiveness, forgiving other people is one thing, forgiving ourselves is another. And I think there's too much focus on forgiving other people, especially forgiving other people prematurely. If something has happened to you, if somebody has done something to hurt you, I'll just give an example of somebody, and this is not any kind of current example for me or anything like that. A lot of times I take examples from my own life, but this is not one. This is just kind of a general one. Somebody's dated somebody for a long time, and then they find out that person's cheated on them, and then they break up. And a lot of times, I have seen this, and I've seen it a lot of times in those situations. You'll be looking at, if it's the man who's cheating, the woman will find that's when the man's texting her all the time, accusing her of cheating. It's almost like there's a guilt projection there. I can think of at least 3 specific people I've known in my lifetime that's happened to, where they're just like, I don't know why all of a sudden he's so concerned about everywhere that I'm going. And I'm like, because he's got somebody else. And then you find out that, yeah, actually he does. So, because that's his guilt response, he externalizes it and says, well, she must be doing it, But that kind of betrayal, you're going to get mad at somebody. I did have a relationship like that probably many years ago now. When did this breakup occur? It was probably 13 years ago, 14 years ago. It was a long time ago. So it's not anything recent. I remember I was dating somebody, and I remember he would get very, very annoyed if, like, I had, we were in a field that, I worked, some of my male colleagues or male students that I've had would come back and they would be like, oh, wow, I haven't seen you in a long time. Let's grab lunch or whatever. And, I mean, it's just, these are your students, but he would get very annoyed with me. Oh, you went to lunch with that one or that one. And I'm like, well, these are colleagues and we all work in this field, and, like, what the heck? But then I would find that he would go to conferences and stuff, and he would be trying to pick up with all these other women. And so in the end of it, there was an incident about that. And finally, I just, we broke it off. But I was enraged, because to me, I'm like, okay, I have tried to put my trust in you, and this is what you've done. And the thing is, this was a relationship where I remember he had said to me, when we first decided, like, it's like usually the post-third date thing where you finally decide you kind of want to start dating. I mean, which doesn't, I guess, always happen that way, but that was the way it was. And when I said that, he was like, I said to him, when he said he wanted to, kind of go more, I don't know what's the word, steady. I said to him, well, okay. I said, do you want to be dating me and other people, or do you want to be just dating me? I mean, how do you want this? You know, what's the thing that you want? And he's the one who had said, no, I want it to just be the two of us. And I was like, okay. You know, because I mean, I was like saying, you know, okay, we're dating, but maybe you still want to date other people. I wasn't closing the door on that. So I was getting very annoyed every time he tried to make it like I'd closed the door on him. I was like, no, you closed the door on yourself. I gave you that. I asked you that up front. This is what we agreed to, right? So that to me was like, I was mad. And I remember one of my friends, she was somebody who was kind of, she ended up sort of unwillingly being involved in the situation. But she had said to me, she says, well, you know, you shouldn't be mad at him because he's just stupid. And I said to her, I said, I'll be mad at him until I'm not. I mean, and yeah, am I mad at him at this point? No, I don't care anymore. I mean, how long has it been? I mean, if I saw this person, I wouldn't be like, you know, I wouldn't be cursing them out. It's just like, okay, you know, but it's one of those things where, you know, you have to allow yourself to, you have to acknowledge what your own hurt is, and you have to be able to take care of your own hurt. If you treat everything like, you know, well, no, I shouldn't feel badly about this. I find this a lot in spiritual practice. People will bypass and they'll say like, oh, no, I'm going to be the bigger person. I'm going to be positive. You know, I think this is really an opportunity and a good thing. And that those things may not actually totally be wrong, but that's not how you feel. And that's why I always tell people, you've got to go with how you feel. It doesn't mean, and again, feeling something doesn't mean you have to take some kind of a toxic action. You know, you don't have to go, it's like, well, you ticked me off. Now I'm going to go hunt you down. Like, you know, there's no need to do that. But it's just, you know, but still, you have to allow yourself an expression of that feeling. Because then what you do is you double the guilt. You'll say like, not only do I feel bad, now I feel bad for feeling bad. Okay. So you have enough of this that goes on in life, and it goes on a lot, and it's going to go on for everybody because this is how human interaction is. There's some people who are going to be in your group, in your tribe, who are going to support you, love what you're doing. There's going to be people who dislike everything about you for no good reason. And that's just how it is. Which is why I was talking yesterday a little bit, and I was getting readings about being solid in one's identity, because when you're solid in your identity, then you feel, you know, you're not, regardless of what happens, regardless of what change goes on around you, you still kind of more or less fundamentally know who you are. And even if those things might be like, well, you know, even if you do get sad or angry or whatever about the situation, ultimately it's not something where it ends up turning, you know, you self-flagellate, you turn it into an attack on yourself. There's a lot here around saying, no, look at the person you are, look at the things that you have. I know I've talked about this before when I work with people who are saying, well, you know, I don't, and I think really where this becomes an issue, speaking of transitions, which is the kind of work that I do with people dealing with transition, is that when you're dealing with a transition, that's a point where you're not sure who you are anymore. Okay? That's a point where the identity that you had, that you were secure in, is now shifted. So when you're moving into that new space, that's where you're more vulnerable to that kind of attack, because you're becoming a new person in a way, like, or at least some aspect of your identity or what you're forward facing is something new, and you're not, it's like a new role you're playing and you haven't figured out your lines yet. You know, you're not really quite sure what you're doing. So when people criticize you, you feel more like, well, you know, they could be right, they could be wrong. Like, you're not feeling as settled and secure in who you are. And that's why I think a lot of people are tempted at that point to just revert back to the thing that they felt solid in. But the key is actually to just recognize that, no, there's a part of you that fundamentally hasn't changed. You're just expanding and expressing what's already around that inner core of who you are. So there's a whole lot that needs to go on around, but you know, the ways in which we need to recognize what is it that we have gratitude for. I can't tell you how many people I think I was starting to talk about this, who want to change careers or want to do things, and for some reason that may be why I've ended up in coaching, because I used to, even when I was working, I had so many people come to my office and be like, well, you know, I'm not happy where I am now, but, you know, I don't know what else I'm going to do. Or I really want this kind of a job, but I don't have any skills for it. And I'm like, well, let's look at the skills that you have. And frequently, they not even, like, if I say to them, oh, well, you know, you've done this and you've done this, and they go, oh, yeah, you know, I guess I did do that. Like, you don't think about it. There's a lot when it comes down to it that you don't, other people have to sometimes also tell you what you're good at, you know, in addition to what you're bad at, you know, I guess. I mean, yeah, we always pay attention to that, but sometimes people will say to you, like, well, no, well, you're a good communicator, or you have good problem-solving skills, or you have this, or you have that. You have things, and in time, a lot of times you don't recognize it, and that's because we sell ourselves short. We tell ourselves, oh, you know what, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm not going to be accepted, you know. And the thing is, we have to accept sometimes too that opportunities that we don't get are. If an opportunity doesn't pan out for us, then sometimes it's just, first of all, it may just not be the right thing for you. I remember I had applied for a job that I was like really like mega qualified for, and I was like one of 2 top candidates, and they ended up going with the other candidate. And I remember somebody saying that they thought that the department head just didn't like the idea that somebody else was coming in who knew as much as she did. Which may or may not have been the case. I mean, everybody has to make decisions based on what they think is going to work in their dynamic. When I went later on, I realized that was the best thing that that would have been a really high paying job. I was really glad I did not get it, because it would have been a job that, with the problems that I developed later on, I would have had to quit on the spot. It was not a work environment that would have worked for me, even though I liked a lot of people who worked in that place. It would have been something that was going in the opposite direction of where I wanted to go. Similarly, when I wanted to move up in the last organization I was in, that we had a provost who had just kind of made a blanket decision that, even though like I had the assistant provost and 40 professors who put me in their top 3, she was like, oh, well, I'm not going to hire anybody who works here already. Like, she just made up her mind she was going to do that, and she based it all on her opinion of another person in another campus that had a similar position to me, and she didn't like that person. So she just assumed everybody who was already there was not worth. So, but again, long term, it was the best thing that happened. That is not a job, in retrospect, that I would have wanted. So sometimes we don't get things for a good reason, and we get shuttled in the direction that we need to go. So in other words, when we reach, because that's another thing people do too. They run into an obstacle and they say, well, see, this means I'm not meant to do this. Oh, and good morning, Joanne. We were just talking about gratitude, and just talking about, not gratitude really, but just self-care. And just about the idea of the way in which we often shortchange ourselves, because we let the negative reflections of ourselves inform us or define us, and then we often ignore what it is that we have to offer people. And as I was saying, it's like it can be a karma to also not just to act in an inappropriate way, but also it can be a karma, within a situation. I don't like to give moral absolutes. Every situation is different. Every situation is different. So sometimes, what's right action in one situation may not be right action in another. But if for some reason we don't, and everybody makes mistakes too, but a lot of times we internalize that and decide that we are not capable. I tried this thing once. Somebody told me, even though I got some good feedback, other people were lukewarm. So yeah, I guess nobody's really interested in this thing that I do, so I'm just not going to do it. And so it can also be a karma to not make use of that, or to let other people define that for you. But again, that inside-outside connection is very, I've had to deal with certain client issues where I've had people who have to kind of learn to separate their feelings from other people. Because a lot of times they may go into a space, and if people are very cliquey in that space, say, and then they feel like they're not, that they're looking at them with a little bit of side eye, then they start to feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Or they'll start to get very, very automatically defensive about things. And it's like, well, you have to know who you are. And ultimately, there's always going to be people, it's very hard to let that kind of stuff just bounce off without closing down. So the self-care here is about self-forgiveness. It's about, how do you forgive yourself? I don't get enough likes on Facebook. I must be wrong. Yeah, or anywhere, really. I mean, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. If I look at my videos, I put up my videos. I look at these tarot videos, and these people have, 80,000 views and mine have like 10, and I'm like, okay, but you know, it's also, it's a matter of what YouTube chooses to show to people and what they don't. So that's part of it as well. You know, the more subscribers you have, the more visible you are. But you just, you know, yeah, seriously, but you just keep going. There's somebody's channel who I watch actually quite regularly, and he was talking about how for years he was at like, for like 5 years he was at like 1,500 subscribers, and he would have a live stream with like 2 people, and now I think he's just past 400,000. You know, and now he's got, and people are messaging him all the time. And when I go on his live streams, he's got several hundred people on. So it's, you know, and I'm sure there's people who have even more than him. But you know what I mean? Given that he's, you know, he's kind of like, okay, he's like, I think that's good. That's moving in the right direction. Like, that's what he'll say about it. And so, you know, that's the thing. But for him, he was like, well, I just was not going to give up on it. You know, I was just like, okay, well, I know what I'm doing. I believe in what I'm doing, and I'm just going to keep doing it. You know, and eventually, when things are ready to come together, they will. Maybe you pick a certain topic, and then everybody's interested in that topic. But the bottom line is that you want to have self-care. Like our center card for today, I've pulled our cards, is sharing. Okay, so we have the Queen of Wands. And, no, wait, is this Queen of Wands? No, yes, it is Queen of Wands. I'm right, okay. And interesting, because her imagery, well, she's got the red in her, but the imagery would almost has an earthiness to it. Like she's holding almost like this, you almost have that cornucopia kind of a vibe, right? But she's basically shining a light on what your abundance is. Okay, she's holding the candle too. Shining a light on what your abundance is, okay? What do you have to share with others, okay? It is a beautiful card, yeah. And it's, and yeah, she's got the sunflowers behind her, which is what you actually see in the Rider-Waite version of this card as well. And yeah, what do you have to share? That's the thing I think that we're being told to focus on right now. Yes, we have some limitations right now. We've got Mercury retrograde, we've got all this different stuff going on. But we, you know, and yes, you know, just because something's not happening immediately doesn't mean you should give up on it. I think that's another sense of it. Yeah, the inner feeling of which we're unaware. We have the existence card, and this is the person sitting kind of on a lotus, which is almost reminiscent of Brahma, actually, like the person who is the creator. Because really, the magician card. This is card number 1. So this is magician energy, is creative energy, right? But this person's looking out at the vastness of the universe. So, and certainly within Hindu mythology, it's like, you know, there's millions of Brahmins and millions of creators that, you know, open up onto and sit on the lotus of this world, of this universe, which is the dream of Vishnu. And when Vishnu wakes up from his dream, the universe goes away, and then when he goes back to sleep, a new one pops in. You know, it's just telling us that yes, we are the creators. We are able to create, but we're also in a vast system, so we're also not doing this alone. So there's an idea here of being creative. And really the tenor of this card too is, if you feel the world's out to get you, just kind of look at the bigger picture. Look at this. Go out and look at the stars, which is a little hard to do in this area where we have a lot of light pollution. But you know, if you imagine the sky like you would see it out in the West, or on one of those islands where there's no light pollution, you realize just what a vast system that you're in, and that you're a piece of it. But that shouldn't make you feel small. Sometimes I think that's the problem. People feel small. They feel like, I'm not, I'm insignificant, right? Well, it's not that you're insignificant. You are a piece of the whole puzzle. That's the beauty of it, right? And the external feeling of which we're aware, we have the Ten of Cups here. This is the Harmony card. You know, being aware that we are part of a system, and what we're doing isn't when we act in accordance with our own truth, with who we are, with what our gifts are. New York City makes you feel that way. Yeah, New York City is just fast. I mean, it's frenetic. I guess because I've lived close to it my whole life. It's like it's very. I've kind of used to the energy there, but yeah, if you're not used to the energy there, it's like, ugh, you know, it can definitely be like that. But yeah, and again, it's a matter of what your normal is, right? But being in harmony with things. And that said, by the way, I could never live in New York City. As much as I like New York, I couldn't live there because it's not an energy that I need to be in the country. But yeah, so externally, there is a harmony there. So I think what it's saying is that things are favorable for you. They're favorable for your development. You were saying when you first got there, you were like, wow, it's definitely it's a very intense place. And actually we have the intensity card, but we'll get there. So here's the thing. Here's the advice card. We have the 5 of Wands, or 5 of Clouds. And this is our comparison card again, where the bamboo shoot is comparing itself to this tree, whatever type of tree this is, maple tree, oak tree, whatever it is. They're not the same. They're both plants, but they're not the same, okay? So, so I think a lot of times that becomes, that's what I'm talking about, that social back and forth. People comparing, oh, is she like this? Oh, does she look as good as that one? Is she better than this one? Or, we're always judging, that there's always this competition between people and this comparison. And that's also part of what we do to ourselves. Now, 5 of Swords, as we know, is a card of defeat. That's that card of, I'm throwing my sword down and walking away because I can't do it, or I can't, or my opponent has defeated me, right? There's that kind of an energy, or there's an envy to that card sometimes, like, oh, I wish I was like that other person, but that, I envy the fact that other person's good at this and I'm not, or whatever. So comparison is not a, this is telling us that, you have something unique. The fact that these two are different, these two are different in the way that they're construed. They're both plants, but they're both very different. And they both have different qualities, different things. You can't just say, you can't have the tree saying like, well, gee, I guess I'm not a good tree because I'm not a bamboo shoot. You know what I mean? Like we're not all the same people. We don't all have the same things to offer. Focus on what you have to offer and the good, what's good about that, and not on what you think you're lacking, And the outcome here is the intensity card. And you were just talking about the intensity of New York, Joanne. We have the intensity card here. So the idea is that I think, I think more or less this is saying you have your gifts, go for it. Be confident in the gifts that you have. Let me pull one of these. I think this is not basically that we're in an energy right now. Well, yes, while we are experiencing, that was in my pull yesterday, honor our gifts. Yeah, it's, we tend to, and also another thing, we tend to think that self-confidence equals self-conceit. Like, oh, you're going to be arrogant about what you know. No, it's not an arrogance. You either know it or you don't. You're either comfortable in it or you're not. And if you're not comfortable in it, you might be faking it for a little while. Fake it till you make it, But, and be willing to admit when you don't know something, Okay. And you're not there's no shame in saying, I don't know the answer. It's just about being real. Because when you're real, and if somebody says you're arrogant, that has more to do with them. Because they may believe that by showing your gifts or by being confident and out there, because we're taught that, putting yourself forward is shame. You should be humble. That's not humility. Humility is being able to recognize, also being able to recognize other people's gifts and not saying I have this gift, so I'm better than the rest of you. It's not a comparison. It's not a comparison. Okay? It's not that's not the key. It's just I have these gifts and other people have gifts too, and we all work together with our gifts, And some people don't want to work with you, and so they don't, Okay, this card from the Essential Oil deck is grapefruit. And our keyword here is nourishment. The trigger statement is, it's all my fault. See, we're talking about that self-blame thing again. True statement is, I see what I truly need. Your energetic body needs nourishment, so begin to discern physical hunger from spiritual hunger. Cherish your body and the way it supports you. Okay? Yeah, so that seems to be coming up too, is that I think I had started this by talking about the way in which some people do self-care through things like retail therapy or something. Sometimes people, eat more or they do more things. Things that are kind of trying to fill in or comfort that space, like thinking of that as a kind of self-care. But this is saying distinguish between those two things. Sometimes those two things can come together and they can overlap. And so it's kind of like, see where that space is that you might feel like you're lacking. And that's what you want to nourish. That's what you want to care. That's where you want to direct your self-care. And directing, so that may not necessarily mean, a lot of times, like, we will go out and do something like that to make ourselves feel better. And, I'm not saying that's wrong, and I don't think this is either, but sometimes we always do that as a stopgap measure rather than addressing what the real need is. Okay, it just becomes kind of the go-to comfort that we have. So the question is, it's like, okay, so it's not that you can't comfort yourself, but you might want to say, well, the comfort may be something that needs to be happening on a deeper level. And a lot of it has to do with recognizing what it is that we have to share, right? So, so it's interesting. So anyway, we're at 15:15. I am going to try to, I've talked about moving these later. I don't quite need to do it yet, because when I got on, it was plenty of sunlight when I came in. As you can see, it's nice and bright in my room today. Yay. I'm so excited about the fact that it is nice out and not gray and humid, and all that kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to this more fall-like weather that's coming in, because then, speaking of intensity, my alert didn't come today. Oh, that's interesting. They didn't tell the truth. They're just kind of like, they're saying, we're telling your followers that you're live. So unless they just did and then they didn't do it. So I don't know. But I was on at 6:30. So, so I don't know. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why people are not jumping in today. Or I had somebody else that jumped in too. But you have to go to an equine therapy event. Oh, okay. Well, that sounds interesting. So we'll have a good time today. I'm going to get going for now. Everybody have a wonderful day, and I will be back tomorrow morning, so take care.